Hello, everyone. So what I want to talk to you about for the next 30 minutes or so is one of the most essential skills I think that you can master in your entire life, whatever your role is, whatever your mission is, but particularly if your goal is to lead and your goal is to organize community. A huge element of making that organization and leadership successful is being able to have influence. And specifically influence without authority, meaning you've got to inspire people to do things without telling them what to do. You can't just walk around shouting out orders. So how do you get people on your side, listening to you, excited to collaborate, just with the way that you communicate? So that's the goal for today. I want to give you a chance to practice some stuff and walk away with some really tangible tools for how you communicate with anyone in your life, but particularly as a leader, as an organizer, as a community builder. So a little bit of background of what we do at Life Labs, my company. We work predominantly with tech companies, so mostly companies that are in the startup phase, companies like Tumblr, Warby Parker, Squarespace, Reddit, about 200 different companies at this point. And what we do there is we find out who are the individuals in these organizations who have the most influence. Who are the official and unofficial leaders there that have this voice and have the ability to get people on their side. One of the most interesting things we've learned along the way is that the people who are the biggest influencers, these legends in their organizations, the big difference between them and everyone else is two things. The quantity of questions they ask, so how many questions do they ask, and the quality of questions they ask. So you can ask a lot of questions, but they can be kind of crappy. So that's what we're really going to focus on, is how do you power up your questions so that you're asking more, and so you're asking better questions that get other people interested in what you're doing and more open to collaborating. So first, let's do kind of a game show style quiz. One of the things we looked at Life Labs was first just question quantity. So what would your guess be, on average, if you were just to like eavesdrop on people's conversations out there? Literally, like imagine listening to those people out there for 15 minutes. How many questions do you think on average people ask in a 15-minute interval? And just shout it out. There was like this hive mind for a moment where everyone said 3. That was kind of awesome. 3, okay, 3, 7, others? 1, 0 questions, all right. Survey says 2 on average. So 0 was close, 3 very, very close. Now, these individuals and their organizations who are seen as top influencers. This is Life Labs research, by the way, but it also is the same number that comes up when you look at the best negotiators and the best salespeople, as well as the top managers. What is your guess? So, these guys, 7, 5, 10, 15. I feel like I'm in an auction. Going once, going twice. All right, sold for 10. So this is just one thing. Literally, if you're like, it's too hot in here, I'm leaving, your number one takeaway that I really encourage you to like let that sink in is just to ask one more question than you ordinarily would. So here's the interesting thing. The reason questions matter is that if you come to someone and you're like, I'm really excited to do this thing, hey, let's pick this theme this year, let's change our mission statement, whatever it is, and let's say you get pushback. So the individual that you're trying to convince is just not that into your idea. What are some examples of questions that you could ask to start getting this person to open up to you? Because what we know from research is that if I'm just trying to convince this guy, and I'm like, no, it's a really great idea, here are my 100 reasons why you're wrong and I'm right, he's not going to like that. So if I was to ask a few questions, what questions might I ask? What are you busy doing? Or, actually, let me push back on that, because that's a good question, but he might still get a little defensive. Who asked that one? Yeah, but tweak that for me just a tiny bit. That's going to make him feel more like you're genuinely curious. What are you up to? Yeah. Great, what are you up to? Yeah. Can I help? Nice. Yes. When is a better time? Yeah, fantastic. So what you're doing here is you're demonstrating a skill that is incredibly powerful, incredibly rare. I would say particularly in tech. People get into tech because they want to solve problems, because they have ideas, and they like moving really fast and getting things done. The people who have the most influence in tech are the ones that are able to push the pause button for a little bit and ask some questions. And particularly, you don't just want question quantity, you want question agility. The ability to pivot really fast into different kinds of questions that get people to open up, hear your perspective, share with you what's really on their mind. So that's what we're going to focus on. I first want to talk about this foundational skill, which is being able to activate enough curiosity that you actually sound authentic when you're asking your questions. And then we're going to go really fast into 6 key question types that I'll give you a chance to practice and apply so that, again, you can walk out of here immediately more influential. Starting first with curiosity. This is fundamental. In order to influence people, you need to get to a curious place. This is a little paradoxical. Oftentimes when people think about influence, they think about being confident, they think about convincing you well, and yet we find that the individuals who are most influential are curious first. Any thoughts on why that is? Yes, a big part of it is, I like you more if you ask me questions. So now I want to hear what you have to say. Yeah. Yes, so if I heard you right, they get to know the other person's side, right? Yeah, so if I'm proposing an idea to you, if I want to get funding, let's say, if I want you to sponsor my event, and I don't really understand what's most important to you, my pitch is going to not really resonate. Yes?
Similar idea, you can tailor your response.
Yes, tailor your response. But it's got to start, I keep forgetting where this dog is. I was like, it's got to start with really, really genuine curiosity. So I want to do a quick exercise with you to try to power up your level of curiosity, which is going to be hard because you are already a very curious group, but let's see if we can get you to the next level. What you will need for this exercise, for this little experiment, is a partner, a pen, and a piece of paper. Partner, pen, piece of paper. Try to be 2 people. If you can't be 2 people, you can be 3 people. Partner, pen, piece of paper. Try to be 2 people. If you can't, you're 3 people. All right. I've got 2 additional pieces of instructions for you. Ready? All right. So, person with the shortest hair in the group, you are going to be the person holding the pen. No one else needs a pen. If you can't quite figure out who's got the shorter hair, just decide randomly. We don't have to get too serious about the hair comparisons. All right, if you are the person with the pen, raise your pen, please, so I know. Excellent. Okay, here are your instructions. So, what we're going to do, you can put your pen down now, thank you. So what we're going to do is for 2 minutes, I'm going to ask you to just get as curious as you can about a particular subject. I'll tell you what that subject is momentarily. So for 2 minutes straight, you are going to try to come up with questions about this subject. The person holding the pen, you are going to be the scribe. All the other people in the group, including the person with the pen, you're going to be coming up with questions. Particularly for this group, you might not write by hand often, so you might need to stretch your hand muscles for a moment there. It's okay, we'll get through this. It'll just be 2 minutes. And the other thing is totally fine if you want. Don't have to write in full sentences. Don't worry about spelling. Don't worry about punctuation. But I would suggest numbering your questions because your mission is going to be to come up with 20 questions in 2 minutes about a topic I will assign in a moment. All right, so 20 questions in 2 minutes. Everyone's coming up with ideas, including the person who's writing. Everyone clear? All right, so here is your mission. You are going to generate 20 questions about, getting timer ready, about the pen in your hand. Go. All right, first of all, let's just see how you did with question quantity. Raise your hand if you got to at least 10 questions, 10 or more. Bam! Okay, that's really impressive. I don't know why I just said bam. That was the first thing that came out of my head. That's what I felt, so I said it. Okay, raise your hand if you had 11 or more, 12 or more, 13 or more. Raise your hand if you're lying. Okay, nice. 14 or more. 15 or more. What? 16 or more. 17 or more. 18 or more. 19 or more. 20 or more? How many? 20? Stopped at 20. You're like, this is fine. This is the bare minimum, and I'm done with that. Okay. Some overachievers got to 21. Fantastic. Honestly, even if you got to over 10, over 12, that's above average. I've done this exercise, I would say, over 200 times at this point. Something really interesting that we keep noticing when we do this little experiment is that around question 7, 8, 9, people start drawing a blank. So their curiosity kind of runs out. And you go, this is stupid, I do not care about this pen, it's hot in here, whatever it is that comes to mind. But if you stick with it, some more interesting questions start emerging. So I'm curious, what were some of the more interesting questions that started to come up for you? Yes. And hang on, just so I could hear everyone. So everyone come back to me from the pen exercise. I promise you, when we're done, you are welcome to keep talking about pens. Yes.
I have this big pen that they gave out, and what I noticed is that like the top of it is open, and so if you leave the pen out for too long, the ink will dry out, and I was just wondering why they did that.
So the question is, why did they make the pen this way? Great. Yes. Does it work in space? Yes. Yes. Yes, you. Is it tied to the mafia? Does the pen have ties to the mafia? Yes. What is the ink made out of? Yes. How does it taste? Two related questions. Yes. Okay, hang on. Everyone quiet down because I want to hear this question. What's the hexadecimal color of the ink? Yep, love it. Thanks. We are at Hackcon. Yes, we'll do one more. Who chose the color scheme? All right, fantastic. So take a moment, look at your list and see the quality of your first questions versus what started happening when you kept staying curious. For most people, the best questions tend to come up toward the end or toward after that 10th question or so. All right, so good. You're in a good curious state. I worry that I've opened Pandora's box of curiosity here. So because we're a big group, to get your attention, I'm going to go like this. If you see my hand up, please also put your hand up. You can also do the quiet coyote or the silent fox, however you want to do it. Okay, perfect. If you see other people's hands up, please raise your hand. It means that I'm trying to get your attention. Awesome. Okay, so this exercise that we did, if you'd like being curious about pens, this is perfect for you. But it also works for just about anything else. Anytime you're feeling stuck, anytime you're about to embark on a new initiative, it really pays to get curious about it. You can do it on your own. So let's say you're going, I need to plan this event. I need to figure out how we're going to get funding, or I need to figure out how we're going to get a space. Figure out, what are your questions about it? Just keep writing questions. Or if you're trying to convince someone and this person is being really difficult or really stubborn, same thing. Start just thinking in questions about this person. You can also even do it as a group. It's a technique that we use a lot at Life Labs called Q storming or question storming. It's a great leadership tool for your toolkit. So step 1 is getting to curious. Step 2, now you're curious, but you can still ask some really kind of crappy questions. Like not 15-minute interval, those 10 questions could really... So what I want to talk about next is what are those really high quality questions that you need? And I think of these as the big 6. These are the biggest, most powerful questions. They're actually very small and simple. You can remember them and start using them right after today. But they're these small changes to how you communicate that make a huge impact in how effectively you collaborate and lead. So I'm going to go through them pretty quickly so that you have some time to practice. The first question tool, is called a playback. You've probably seen something like this at some point. You absolutely don't have to use exactly this language, but the goal is that you help people feel heard and that you actually avoid miscommunication. Fun fact, if you ever decide to leave tech and go into hostage negotiation, this is the #1 tool you would be trained in the FBI to use as a hostage negotiator. Any guesses on why that is? What's the psychology behind this tool? Yes? What's that? Calm? Stalling, yes, it's a stall tactic. That's a part of it, yeah. And it builds rapport, right. Yeah, so, I mean, there are other reasons. Like if you're in a hostage negotiation scenario, just like in a community organizing scenario, you want rapport, maybe you want to stall sometimes, but you also want to make sure you haven't miscommunicated. You want to make sure, are we on the same page here? Because you can waste so much time and harm so many relationships and your whole reputation as a result of just simple miscommunication. So playback, really powerful. Just as an example here, can someone do a quick playback of what this person is saying? Yes, I'll read it out loud. I don't remember. The thing I'm worried about is how long it will take to get the project done. I don't want it to take forever like it did last time, and I'm not sure if it's top priority. It's a simple playback. Yes?
So you're worried about the timeline and the significance because of your last project?
Great, so you're worried about the timeline and the significance because of your last project. And you could even make it shorter, so you're worried about the timeline and the significance. And you did something advanced, actually, which brings us to the next question tool. I'm going to give you another one, and then we'll put it together to practice, which is called a split track. A split track is a kind of playback, but what you're doing is instead of just playing back the bulk of what you heard, you're actually paying attention to see, are there different tracks? In psychology, we say, are there confounding variables? Do you think that the person's only talking about one thing, but they're actually talking about several things? If you can get clear on what those different things are, you can be much more effective at understanding what's the biggest need they have, what's their true concern, what's the true issue here. So here's another example. Oh, this is the same example. I'll read it again. The thing I'm worried about is how long it'll take to get the project done. I don't want it to take forever like it did last time, and I'm not sure if it's top priority. Now, you actually already did a split track there. What are the 2 different tracks? Yep, so one is time, one is prioritization. Right, so if I were to split track this person in order to really make headway in that conversation, I would say something like, all right, so it sounds like there are 2 things. One is the timeline, the other is the priority level. Which of those should we talk about first? It sounds simple. It's actually pretty cognitively taxing, so I want to give you a chance to try this out. For this next exercise, you will need a person, one person. Because we're a large group, if you happen to be in a group of 3, we'll have one person as observer and then 2 people practice. And then after this, please keep practicing with each other. So figure out who your partner is right now. Try to be a group of 2. If you have to be a group of 3, one person will be the observer. All right, once you have your partner, let's go with the person closest to this side of the room. That's my left, your right. You are going to be person 1. Person closer to this side of the room, you're going to be person 2. If you are in the middle, you're going to be the observer. Okay? All right, so here's how this is going to go. Person number 1, for 1 minute straight. 1 minute straight. If you're an introvert, I'm really sorry. So am I. It sucks to talk for that long. But it's good for the practice for the person number 2. So person 1, for 1 minute straight, you're going to talk about something that you're feeling hopeful about. Now, the trick here is I want you to speak, don't speak very clearly. I don't want you to say, the first thing I'm hopeful about is, the second thing I'm hopeful, just like word vomit. Just like throw out those words. Person number 2, right, this side of the room, you're just gonna listen quietly for a minute straight, no interruptions, no questions. You can nod and smile if you want. But then when I say split track, you're gonna split track the key points of what they said. It's not a memorization exercise, so just like you said, there's the time thing and there's the prioritization thing. It could be that short, that succinct, okay? And then person number 1, let them know, did they get it right or not? And then I'm gonna say switch, and that'll be a cue for person 2 to get your revenge. So now you're gonna talk for 1 minute straight. I'm gonna say split track, person 1, you're gonna play back the key points of what you said. Questions? All right, answers. So person number 1, you're the one closer to this side of the room. For 1 minute straight, word vomit. What are you feeling hopeful about? And time's up. Thank you. Thanks. Awesome. All right, just another quick pro tip before we move on. Something that I noticed as I was observing the audience was body language. A lot of communication is dependent on something called paralinguistic communication. So not just what you say, but how you're saying what you're saying. 3 of my favorite tips to keep in mind when it comes to body language. Your arms. Or rather, actually, forget your arms for a moment. Think about your medial line. This is a part of your body that's basically between your collarbone and your belly button. If you are judging someone, what are you going to do to your medial line? Do it right now. If you're talking to someone and you're going to cross it off in some way. Or if you're uncomfortable, you're at an event and you're like, let's say, holding a drink of some kind, and you're talking to someone and you're feeling uncomfortable, you're going to hold it like this. So when we feel uncomfortable with people or when we're judging people, we tend to close off this part of the body. But actually, when I'm speaking with you, me as human, when I'm speaking with you and your medial line is crossed off, even if you're just kind of comfortable that way, right? Like if that's just like how your arms are folded, I might perceive that as being judged or you trying to create some distance. So something small to think about, particularly in your role as a leader, you want to try to constantly think about opening up your medial line, particularly when you're feeling uncomfortable or when you're feeling frustrated. The next thing is you want to try to square up your shoulders with people. Right? So another way you can think about it is point your feet at the people that you're talking to. I know it's kind of hard because of the seats that you're in. But you can practice this when you're out there in the wild. And then last thing, a psychologist did this really fun study where they brought people into a lab and they had them just chat with one another in the waiting room. What they didn't tell them was that the chairs had little scales in the feet of the chairs. So what they were looking at was how people's weight was distributed in the chairs while they were having a conversation. And they found something really interesting. The people who were rated as the best listeners, what do you think their weight distribution was? Yep, leaning forward, just a tiny bit. Especially if you're like arms crossed, sort of looking away from someone, leaning back. This is the worst thing you could do to a person when you're having. If you want to make people really uncomfortable, do that. If you want to make people feel more open to your perspective, like you more, then you want to think about open, square, lean. Open, square, lean. So open the medial line, square up with the person, lean in a little bit. Yes, just like that. You can certainly overdo it, so play with it to find the right balance for you. All right, these 2 are the most powerful. I'll run through the other ones quickly. Also really, really good ones, but if you're going to start anywhere, playbacks and split tracks are the place to go. Next up, we've got blur questions. A lot of the times when you're talking to people, they're using language that's really blurry. And your goal, particularly when you're trying to influence someone to move something forward, is you want to go from something really blurry to clarity, to the same exact information being understood and processed by both of you. So for example, in this sentence, I will email the file to you ASAP. What is the blur word? ASAP, right? What does it mean? For some people, ASAP means yesterday. For some people, it means, I know you'll never really do it. For other people, it might be a week from now, whatever it is. This is the heart of miscommunication. When we work with tech companies as they're growing, as they're scaling, one of the biggest problems they have is people start using blurry language, and then no one really knows what they're talking about. So the blur word question is literally just getting in the habit of training your ear to notice and kind of mentally underline those blur words, and then ask yourself or ask others, what does that mean to you? We talked before about diversity and inclusion. If you're trying to be inclusive and everyone's trying to be inclusive without actually stopping, like we did in this talk earlier, to stop and say, what does inclusion mean to you? How does diversity look to you? Those kinds of questions actually allow people to move from just having general discussions to really taking steps forward to make progress. So that's another one of my missions for you is throughout this Hackcon to constantly think about what are the blur words we're using? What do we mean by that language? Another kind of question that I really love is called the scaling question. So sometimes, let's say you propose an idea. I don't know why this example looks like it's from the 70s. But let's say someone tells you, I'm not really digging that idea. You probably won't use a blur word question. It probably doesn't make sense to say, well, what does digging mean to you? So here, when people are talking about kind of concepts that you can't define just by saying, hey, can you define that for me? A really powerful question type is the scaling question. And it has two really important parts. The first part is, on a scale of 1 to 10, as an example, where does it fall for you? So if I'm like, hey, I really would love for you to sponsor this hackathon, and maybe the organization you're approaching says, it's just not a fit for us. You can say, all right, on a scale of 1 to 10, with 10 being a perfect fit, where do you see this potential? Where do you see the partnership? So that's level 1. Here you're getting people to start giving you some valuable data information, right? Versus just random blurry words. The second part of this question, though, is where it gets really magical, and that's where you say, what would it take to move your score by 1 point? Right? So if they're like, I'm not thinking this is a fit, and you go, well, what score would you give it? And maybe they say, it's a 6. If they say it's a 2, you should probably just forget it. Not always, but in most cases, if it's a 2, that means you have to pick a totally different tactic. But if they say something like, it's a 6, it's a 7, you can say, all right, great, what could improve it by 10%? Or what would move it up just by 1 point? The 1 to 10 scale, this is another example, the 1 to 10 scale I think is really nice and easy. I've also heard people do fun stuff with this where they'll say, well, how bad is it on a scale of a puppy peeing on your shoe all the way to getting stuck in rush hour traffic in Manhattan, let's say. It could be whatever you want, but giving people some kind of scale allows you to have this shared language and for you to nudge them forward into taking action. It's a scaling question. Any questions so far about the questions? All right, so I'm going to add on 2 more, and then we'll wrap up with a question that you would like to be asking more often. So next 2 question types share the reasoning. When you look at this individual here, what are some words that come to mind? Just shout it out. Angry. Frustrated. What's that? Pirate. Yeah, I agree. I see a pirate as well. Or, she opening a jar. Might still be a pirate, opening a jar. Here's why I think this is interesting. This is actually where my area of psychology comes in. So I spend a lot of time researching people's first impressions versus their second impressions. So this is your initial appraisal, and this is a reappraisal. Your initial appraisal tends not to be very nice when a person is frustrating to you. So think about the most difficult people you've ever had to deal with. Just think about them right now, bringing them into the room with you if they aren't actually here already. You're probably seeing them like this, right? You're making some sort of quick assumption about what's going on for them, and that assumption probably isn't very nice. Individuals who are highly influential are incredibly effective at zooming out and understanding the reasoning behind the things that people do and say. So you want to ask questions to understand people's logic. If they seem to be completely illogical, completely stubborn and set in their ways, you want to try to get in their heads and ask questions that help you understand what's really going on there. So for example, can you walk me through your thinking? Or what led you to that thought? What's important to you about that? The really important thing about doing this is that it not only, I'm going to just jump ahead for a moment, it not only prevents you from misunderstanding the person's intentions. It also avoids something called the backfire effect. Anyone know what that is, backfire effect? It's really good to know about human beings. Here's how the backfire effect works. Let's say that I wanted to convince you all that tech wasn't the field for you. It's not right for you. It's going down the toilet, no opportunities in the future. And let's say that your level of commitment to tech on a scale of 1 to 10 was an 8. And I was like, forget influential questions. We've got like 5 minutes left together. I just want to convince you that tech is bad and that there are many other industries that would be a better fit for you. At the end of that, me trying to convince you, you started in an 8. Where would you be? 9, 10, 11, perhaps. Right. This is something called the backfire effect, and it's something we often forget about. When we try to convince someone that they're wrong, what we succeed in doing is helping them feel even more right. So not only does asking about people's reasoning allow you to really start to understand what's going on for them, it also lets people's defenses down. It makes them feel heard, and it makes them feel interested in knowing what your perspective is. And this is the heart of any time, like if anyone's ever been in a Facebook argument, of the political nature perhaps, this is basically what's happening. People are just backfiring at each other. And you get off Facebook and you're like, I can't believe how right I am and how wrong everyone is. So to do the opposite of that, you want to be able to really understand people's reasoning. So I want to give you a moment just on your own right now. Let's go for like 30 seconds. And you can jot things down or just think in your head if you prefer. And I'd love for you to think about someone who's made a decision you really don't agree with. Or maybe they have a stance or an opinion that really makes you frustrated. And just take a moment and ask yourself, what do you think their reasoning might be? And by the way, don't say because they're a jerk. So think about, for them, what's their internal logic? Why did they decide that? Why are they acting that way? I'll give you about 30 seconds for that. All right. In our last couple of minutes, I want to share with you my last of the big 6 questions that we've seen do wonders in times where individuals are kind of having a hard time collaborating or taking action. And that's the next steps question. And it is literally just this. This tiny little question actually takes people from feeling stuck and confused and disorganized to actually making progress. And a little variation on this, a slightly more advanced version of the next step question is, what's the next smallest step I or we can take to get things started? What you want to do is avoid people feeling like this. Anyone had that experience? You're standing in front of the cereal aisle or whatever it is, or there's so many different projects you can work on, so many different ideas you have. Where do you start? For many people, they don't start because of this thing called the paradox of choice in psychology. Or this fatigue of trying to take action because there are just too many ways to start. So the next smallest step question actually propels action. It gets people to be not just willing to hear you, but willing to commit to some sort of small idea. So with that in mind, before I leave, I want to just give you an opportunity to commit to one small action. And that's to pick one question that you would like to ask more often. All right, everyone. So again, big 6 questions. If you're going to forget everything else from this session, I would say anytime you feel like you want to have an impact on someone, start with curiosity. Not only will that make you more influential, it also makes you a better human being. And we could all use some better human beings in this world. So happy influencing, happy question asking. Here's my email address if anyone has questions or questions about questions. Please feel free to use me as a resource forever and ever. Thank you all very, very much.